Okay, all right, I want to talk about it. I was Christ's girl. He was my fella. Well, who wasn't? I worked the fertile croissant in between the testaments. I knew potentates and prophets, centurions and saints, Pharisees and Sadducees, and I want to tell you old capital H, he was as sweet a kid as ever kept a girl up all night talking. Him talking, not me. I ain't talked till now. I was a cute kid from Gehenna. Mom and Dad were nothing to write home about. I wasn't in his league in that department, but then I didn't have his press agents. And I'm alive today, so what does that tell you about this crazy game? I learned the facts of life in the streets, and they were no surprise. I'd figured as much. The old man didn't cotton to my acquaintances among the Arab caravansaries or the Roman legionnaires, so I skedaddled to Joppa just as soon as I filled out. Wended my way with a Circassian slave dealer, a smoky blonde with porcelain skin. A blow to him when we got to Joppa and he found out that beautiful blonde Circassians win on the slave block automatically, don't we all? On my own at 11, made my only mistake in a lifetime fraught with opportunities. I listened to a Phoenician cooch choreographer on one night of free-flowing grape juice and agreed to meet him in Jerusalem for a fling at the movies. Got there, found out the movies hadn't been invented yet. Irked my ass. But I learned. So I was in Jerusalem working both sides of the street called Straight. I was making notches through the Sanhedrin, also spreading goodwill among tourists, and sending lots of Roman soldiers off to conquest happy too. I reserved the right to render service to anyone, regardless. Things weren't as segregated as they look in your history books. When your era goes between hardcovers, they'll classify you all by religion too. I mean, Nixon was not quintessentially Quaker, get my meaning? The boys in Jerusalem were like boys all over, except for that world-famed cosmetic surgery you know where. It don't affect performance, even if it does make them feel like they gotta overcompensate, but then country boys always do. Like I used to say to Veronica, they're all alike, just some of them are more alike than others. Veronica thought I was a brain. That's what makes you one. I used to invest some of her guilt for her. She's retired now, owns groves, owes me everything. Who doesn't? Which brings us to John the Baptist. Yeah. J the Bee was kinky for a kid, but cute. Where did they get that self-flaying and bug-eating? It pops up in those tall, naughty, hot-eyed types. Something they read? I backed a couple of his first gigs and took back nothing but my principal and 10 per. Could have copped expenses and tech advisor fees too, but Mary the Mag plays straight. John drew like lions and Christians put together, kind of like your Gary Cooper in a couple of my old Fox muffs. He used to dress up like that when he'd visit my tent, and I talked him into trying it in public. The in crowd giggled, but the rubes, zowie. He'd stand where the north light hit him, work up tears, and give him saliva and salvation with those weird glowing eyes. I think his pancreas was fucked. Locust eaters, you know. Luke, the physician, agreed with me on everything. John the Bee was his own worst friend, had a complex inferiority. We spent some spare time together horizontally, and the faster he'd go, the louder he'd yell, "I am unworthy, you deserve better, I am dirt." Sometimes I'd soften and give him a flash of the lash and a gouge with the stiletto heels, and he'd feel better about things. He was a setup for old Capital H's press corps. They knew they had a class act in Jesus, and they wanted to get him introduced to the crowd by someone with garbo, Spanish for style. And here was John packing in the populace and moaning how he wasn't worthy. I didn't see it coming, to tell you the truth, and that's what I'm here for, to tell you the truth. JC started haunting John's crowd. It was like James Dean studying Brando, dig? Or Donovan sucking up to Dylan. I don't say they had anything actual going, JC and John, but performers are mostly twin-gated, and John had this aura of bondage and discipline. He saw this saintly kid in blue-white, hell to keep clean in Palestine, and he took him in, or Jesus took him in, have your way. I don't think JC was consciously hustling John. He was just an ambitious kid with a top dodge, aching to get out of Galilee, and the top attraction on the salvation circuit was woo-woo over him. I'd have taken advantage of it myself. It was those disciples made it all schmarmy. Imagine 12 Harvey Levins. John would be standing up on an evocative outcropping of primeval sandstone in the last roseate rays of a Mediterranean sunset, like I taught him to, wailing sweet and wild how there was one to come after him. The Messiah bit was his big wind-up. And this whole apostle lot were circulating among the suckers saying as how the one was Jesus. Jesus was the man, number 2 with a bullet, sure to cop all best newcomer awards. Kill racket it is, really, huh? I would have retired old John with a solid annuity and waited till the right time to issue his golden hits if that goddamn Salome hadn't happened along. I hate 2 things in this world: sheriffs who don't stay bought and rich amateurs. Salome came home from school in Rome, my dear, overdoing the I must elevate my people shtick. She had everything: money, position, looks, expensive grooming actually, palanquins, a hymen, and a fashion sense that denuded every ostrich for a decade. Effective, I grant you, but on that budget I could have brought back the matriarchy. And Princess S never had to go on her back to get anyone on her side. Oh, stuff it, Mary Magdalene. On to the story, M.M. She came palanquining by one of John's matinees and caught him killing the tribes. I guess she was bored by her initial hit. Your hometown's a come-down after you've seen the Colosseum. And she was limited. Her mom and stepdad must have drawn some sharp lines for her about mingling bloodlines with the Roman devils. All Herod and Herodias had to offer was racial purity. So Sal had faced the fact that in Judea she would look forward to nothing much more than state marriage with some climber from the Sanhedrin. I feel for her. Under the stove with a broom, I feel for her. Now stop that, Mary. So here she tumbles onto some local circumcised talent with Class A vibrations. Her platinum mesh veils blew back. I think she controlled them on strings. And John caught just one fast shot of rubies and boobies. I was at the show that day, counting the take and judging the laughs in some new material, and for the first time I heard John Boy lose his place. Oh, I was prime pro. He got him back with some Elijah and Apocalypse, but I saw where he was staring, and so did 12 little men. John was fit to be tied and whipped and stuck with pins through his nipples. But nothing I did helped. When he started canceling late shows on full moon nights, I knew where to look for him, in a certain palace parvis. The apostles were hot. They'd tried for an intro for their boy to Sal, but not a doing. They caught John off guard enough to get him to pull a big baptism special with Jesus, featuring special dialogue by that shit-eating Simon called Peter. Never trust a boy that changes the family name. Then the rest of them, dotted in the mob, cried out how they saw the Holy Spirit descend and how JC was the entertainment event you'd waited for. And as it eventuated, the papers that day were looking for filler material, and JC started going on for the shows John blew. Well managed, I admit it. Well, I saw the writing on the wall. That's where I learned to read. And was going to talk retirement to my client, but I hadn't reckoned on true love. You can understand why. I don't know what upper-class chicks mix with their lip rouge, but it hit J the B like DMT in the eyeball. Whatever twaddle she was given John, and that's all she was given, I'll lay you 1 to 1, he took main line to the heart. She said nobody understood her, with that finishing school lisp, I'm not surprised, and her home was stifling, and Stepdaddy looked at her, and next thing we knew, Stepdad was being laid to filth by Jay, who was being no court poet to little Missy's mammy, too. Well, you can't mix showbiz and politics, they're too much alike. I tried to talk touring, get him on the road. He'd blown it in the big pomegranate, but the sticks were clawing for him. Oh, our crowds were still record, but the take grew daily less. Half was comps now, spies and columnists, as John waxed wrother about uncleanliness in the palace. Herod was already unpopular, as only the last in a long line of ass-kissing genocidal sellouts can be. Herodias had nothing but her fictional dignity, and being called Satanist adulterers didn't help their image. Sal just saw her name in the papers, and so what? Rich kids think daddy can buy off anything. The upshot was Herod invited John and Sal to do an act at the palace. She danced, it says here. I tried to talk to the turkey, but come twilight he followed the mimosa fumes to the big house. Last I saw him, broke my heart. He left the till behind. I put it in a strong box in Caesarea in his name, minus my moving expenses, and found an excuse to remove me to the seashore. The papers in Caesarea had banner headlines, how Herod bumped off John and Salome, or how Salome, quote, killed herself in love's despite, end quote. Having a special device that reads between the lines, I cooled it in Caesarea with some sympathetic sandalwood factors and wound up at a bash of Pontius Pilate's. His wife was with him, but there are glances that make heliography look slow. So I got it all together next day, just in time to accept an impromptu invite that arrived on a silver salver, weighted down by several star sapphires and King Herod's favorite opal. Ever since then, I think of Caesarea as the big opal. Well, old P. Pilot and I whiled away some memorable Tom Perdue while Mrs. P. busied herself writing dream books. I'm not one to kiss and tell, so I won't tell you about the kissing. Pontius had already had 6 years in the Holy Land and was ready to give it back to Baal, when I came along and rekindled his interest in my hot-blooded, paradoxical, ever-restless people. The whole Herod Salome John brouhaha had reached Rome and brought down on Pontius the one thing he dreaded most: paperwork. So he had sternly warned Herod to cool everything. Therefore, things were calm in Palestine outside of a certain seaside villa, and I greatly fear I got a little bit out of touch. Like I often say, it's just as easy to fall for the well-set-up agent of a world power through whose hands half the world's taxes trickle as it is to bob for dropped olives in a cow pasture. I don't really say it all that often. If you're listening with anything between your ears, once is enough. So about a year and a half later, Tiberius, whom I never really met, ordered Pilate and retinue to La Giroux to handle the Passover crowds. I needed some new undies anyway. Somebody was always swiping them and hanging them on Caesar's bust at the embassy. He was like a little boy. So I trundled up to the focus of all faiths, a respectful league behind my procurator. I can be kittenish when I know all the bills are paid, so PP and I kept Billy Doo scooting to and fro on the wings of trained doves. His replies were a little slow because the dear little dappled darlings had to drag back strings of pearls and dishes of cut diamonds, a new item at the time. I leased a comparative hovel just a secret tunnel away from the official residence and made a distinct contribution to welfare by hiring about 500 husky Hebrews to redecorate it. I'm trying to say I was busy. No time to read the papers. When everything and everybody was bronzed and burnished, I held a press conference just so I could tell the scribes I didn't want any publicity. They are your best friends. They loved the party favors, none of whom was under age. I was still basking in the applause for my entrance, the elephant, of course, was rented, when one of the press corps held up this 5-star headline with a 3-word phrase about me and asked, how did I like them opals? Well, at first I didn't understand exactly what I was being called. I've never been near Babylon, and that other word is one whose meaning I do not know. Then my eyes uncrossed. Never lose your cool in front of scribes, they'd sell your giblets. And I saw who was supposed to have said it about me. Well, I gagged, I really did. I gave him his first chance, or he foxed it from me. It amounts to the same thing. And here he was making pronouncements about scarlet women, and me a dyed in the Damask conservative. I said something about Pontius and me just being good friends, and accidentally pulled a lever which dropped the entire press corps into a pool full of kosher gin, and went off to my bedwing to peruse the late editions. Was I aced? Apparently the kid had not only got to be hot news, but was in fact the very disturbance PP had been sent in to settle. I only skimmed the reviews of his number: positive thinking, guaranteed eternal wages, kingdom at hand, all golden oldies. But this cat had set himself up as king of the Jews, and get this for unsubdivided Gaul, heir apparent and incontestable for the throne of heaven itself. Okay, blasphemy and treason are matters of individual taste, I grant you. But on top of that, he had libeled me as 8 kinds of awful, none of them nice. I turned to my trusty eunuchs, as far as I can throw them, and said, and I quote, "Get out the gold lame number I was saving for Saturnalia, big ass. Mama has got to go fight for her reputation in the streets, where I got it in the first place." Well, you won't find it in the scriptures unless some big-mouthed Dead Sea Gnostic came unbribed, but there has not since Moses met monotheism been an encounter like the day I went looking for Emmanuel. Never trust a boy that changes his name. I did everything to attract attention and set off Roman candles, this being a local dispute. They say his entrance into Jerusalem was a fair-sized show. Well, I had laborers laying pavement before me, trumpeters dressed as satyrs and centaurs, 200 girls from an establishment where I'm on the board of directors banging cisterns and timbrels, plus the living waters, balloons for the kids, smoke curtains, trick-flying flamingos, and just for the hell of it, formation marching giraffes. I myself was on a mastodon's back. You could still get a mastodon in those days if you didn't ask any questions. In a gilded cage, flinging back sheets like birdseed to the holiday hordes. Cost a mint. Wrote it off as PR. I just wanted to show capital H him that I starts with a capital letter too. I circled around the byways for hours, and fun's fun, but I was getting raw on the roost from my platinum perch and wondering if I hadn't scared a certain slanderer into the mountains of Moab. I'll pit a showman against a shaman any time.